Good evening. Welcome to this video and welcome to my channel. I'm Zahra. We're gonna have a little bit of a pre-bedtime chat about the books that I read in May. I've prepared my tea. I actually didn't have chamomile left, which I was kind of bummed out about because I was hoping it'll help me sleep. I've actually not been sleeping very well the last few nights. Without going too far into tangent, we're getting into a very stressful period of time in my life because I have a lot of packing to do and just a lot of errands and stuff to run before I move from this house and I'm going somewhere else. Fingers crossed. I'm really excited. It's gonna be nice to start fresh. We're gonna talk about the books and that's how I'm going to just avoid thinking about it for a few minutes as we talk. So I'm not gonna count the number of books that I read. I'm just gonna go in a list. There's specifically one book that I'm just not going to name. It was a reread, but I don't really see fit to name it because I'm not trying to promote it. I know that sounds really weird to say without saying, but I marked it in my Goodreads and stuff, but I'm just not going to talk about it because I'm not going to promote it because I don't like the author. Simple as that. But we're gonna talk about the rest of the books that I read. I actually have 2 of them with me. The rest of them were library reads. Let's get into it. As usual, I'm going to let me put my tea down. But as usual, I'm going to focus on some books more than others, basically the ones that kind of left an impression on me. Specifically with this month, I feel like a few of them are going to take me on a few little conversational tangents, but I'm really excited for that. The first book that I read was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I was really excited to read this for a long time and I kept putting it off because I wanted to buddy read it with one of my friends, but we've both been so busy that we just never got the chance to line up. Usually in these cases it's more my fault than my friends. Every time we want a buddy read, I'm always running behind to catch up, and so this month I decided to just pick it up. I listened to this as an audiobook and honestly I didn't really remember much. Right now I don't really remember much. I can tell you the basic plot points of the story, which is that we have our main character and she basically has the ability to do magic, but she lives in a kind of religious city, and so there's always the risk of everybody thinking that she's a witch. Yeah, and then she ends up doing some sort of a trial, finding getting in involved with this man who's also a familiar, I think. Is that spoilery? I don't think that's spoilery. Yeah, because you don't know anything about it anyway. Yeah, it does. It says it in the front cover that she gets involved with him. I'm so tired, you guys, but I really want to talk to you about these books too. This wasn't really a standout for me. I was kind of here's the thing. I feel with Six of Crows, Leigh Bardugo set the bar so high that anything that's not Six of Crows will ultimately disappoint me because I want to be back in Six of Crows. And I actually haven't reread those books in such a long time on purpose because I'm planning on doing a reread month because I just want to feel alive again. And I really want to read a lot of the books that I read maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago that I loved, but I just haven't picked them up since. So anyway, not to go on a tangent, I think the writing was strong. Leigh Bardugo is an amazing writer and I did like the story. It just I don't know, I was just oh, Six of Crows. But yeah, so that was The Familiar. The next book that I want to talk to you guys is actually a little poetry collection, The Wasteland and Other Poems by T.S. Eliot. Full disclosure, even though I was in an MFA and I did a poetry workshop and I was surrounded by brilliant poets, I continue to not understand poetry most of the time. I just feel I get dizzy almost because a lot of the book, I don't know how to explain it. But I struggle with poetry and I feel stupid when I read poetry because I'm I don't get it. Some types of poetry, when I read Mary Oliver, I feel I get it. I get what she's saying. I've only read individual poems of hers, but when I've read those ones, I've been this is beautiful and I get poetry. But then I'll pick something up like this and I'm 80% of this, I don't know what you're talking about, which I like, again, makes me feel stupid. I feel like this and just poetry that I don't understand is something that I have to revisit over and over and over again so that I can maybe understand it. Upon like first reread, I really did think it was beautiful. What I usually like to do, even if I don't get what's going on entirely, is just highlight lines that I think are like super beautiful. I was reading this on a plane ride home and I didn't have my highlighter with me, so I actually didn't highlight any that I can share, but I can share the line, one of the lines, which is actually this one here, which I thought was just so cool. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. And I thought that was so beautiful. I think my favorite poems, actually, let me share with you guys my favorite poems, because there were some poems that I loved. I think my favorite poems, from what I remember off the top of my head, was, so I actually read the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock for a class, so I did like that one, because like revisiting it, I was like, wow. I did really like Preludes. I loved the imagery in that poem, and then I also liked The Hollow Man. There were a few other ones I'm pretty sure that I liked, but I've completely forgotten, and that's because I just couldn't mark it down because I didn't have a highlighter. But I did really enjoy this, and it's 100% something that like later on down the line I'm gonna have to revisit so that I can like understand it a little bit better than I did this time around, if that makes sense. Trying to, like, this is not super related, but it is related because poetry. I'm trying to get more into understanding poetry and writing poetry and experimenting with it. I just feel like I've always been so out of my depth when I try, but I am trying now. So that was The Wasteland and Other Poems by T.S. Eliot. I put honey in it this time. This is the peach honey one. I always expected to say it here, but it doesn't. And I really like it more with honey. Next up, I read Human Acts by Hong Kong. This was a very startling and painful novel to read. I didn't know anything about it going in, besides the fact that it had won a prize, and I was really interested in it because like people were talking about it. So I didn't know what to expect, but it basically follows, within the context of uprisings and student rebellions, it follows this specific character's death and how that death kind of reverberates and ripples out and affects other people in his life, people that he met in passing or became more close to and acquaintances with, but also his mother, which was like one of the last perspectives, which was so heartbreaking to read. And then also like his best friend and his best friend's sister. There were really, like, what was so crazy about this book was this idea of human cruelty. And I really appreciated that there was no shying away from the reality of violence and the reality of humanness. And like, the thing that I was thinking about with this book when I was reading it and like connecting it to the title specifically was this idea of like the violence that we as human beings inflict upon each other, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And in this scenario, it's intentional, right? But what is it that drives a person to be so evil? But on the other hand, because she takes this perspective of the people and the victims and the people who are harmed by that humanity, you're also seeing the inverse, like the reverse of that, and the opposite of that, which is the kindness and the care and the grief and the love that is there between human beings, and why we care for each other and how we care for each other and how we love, not just in life but also like after death. It also made me really think about like the effect that we have on each other as people. And I think about this a lot because I've been recently thinking about just the little things that we do that leave marks. And it's not directly related to this book, but it also kind of is, because it's just like the distinct and like close view of humanity under a microscope, whether it's good things, whether it's bad things. And I remember a few years ago, 5 years ago now, which is so crazy to say, but during COVID, I was really sad and lonely in my house, in my apartment. I was living in Michigan at the time, and there were a few books that I was planning on hauling into little free libraries. And so I don't know what possessed me to do this. And sometimes now I think about it, I'm like, that's a little bit cringe, girl, but go past you, I guess. But I wrote little post-it notes of like, you are worthy or something like that. I don't even remember exactly what I wrote, but I wrote on little post-it notes, like some like really affirmations basically. And I put them in the books that I would then went around my little like city where I was and put them in little free libraries. And I don't think about that a lot, but for some reason, thinking like I just remember this right now because like I wonder where those notes ended up, and it's a piece of my writing somewhere out in the world, like just my handwriting on a piece of paper. Or like the number of times where I've bought a used book and there was either an old bookmark in there from like somewhere across the world, or even what I love more than that is like, I'm literally going on a tangent right now, guys, but I want to show. I bought this book, which this is not a book that I read. Basically, I bought this book used a while ago, and there's this little note in here that someone wrote to someone when they gave them this book. It says, "You'll never look at the nursery wallpaper in quite the same way again. Much love." And then I can't read the name, but it's two people, I think. Someone, and there's a little and sign. And every time, like, I'm so, like, the fact that I could, like, pull this as an example for you guys is just so funny to me because, but I think about this all the time and I'm like, there is a, like, full human being out in the world right now who wrote this, who is living a completely different life than me, and who is completely, like, just, I don't know if I've ever met them in real life, and I probably never will, and yet they're affecting me. You know what I mean? Like, some version of them exists in my mind now because I read their writing like this. And I know that's a really long tangent, but I just wanted to share that. Back to the books I read. I really enjoyed this novel, but it was also super heartbreaking, and just some points it was really hard to read because, again, she doesn't shy away from the violence at all. And when she's doing the description of the bodies and just the harm, it is really intense, which I was not expecting. Even though it's like a written medium, as I was reading it, it was like visually in my mind shocking. I'm really glad that I picked this up, and there was so much that I highlighted in this because it just was, again, so powerful. I'm not shocked that it won an award because it really deserved it. The next book that I read was 7 Days in June. This was a recommendation from one of my close friends, and she basically lent it to me, a physical copy, like a year or something ago, but I couldn't read it fast enough. Like, I couldn't get to it fast enough, so I ended up giving it back to her, but it always was in my mind, like, I need to read this because she told me to read it. And I really enjoyed this one. I read it as an audiobook and I just loved it. Like, I don't think I've ever read a second chance romance, or like maybe I have, but none of them come to mind. And this one was so fun, and I love that the main character is a mom and she's like balancing dating with motherhood. There's so much commentary on like what we fill our lives with, and how we kind of sometimes lose focus on like what we want or what we deserve over what we think we should do, or what we should be doing, our responsibilities, beyond it just being like a really cute romance. And it was also just so much depth to it. Like, there were layers in this story. The male main character is like mentoring different younger kids because he doesn't want them to end up like he did, because he was like really, I think he was a drug addict or like struggling with drugs. I think there was like talk about him being sober now. Like, that dynamic was really just towards the end, something happens that you're just left really heartbroken for him. But also, it's a romance, but there's so much. I think the easiest way I can say it is that there's just a lot of layers to this, and I really enjoyed it, and the romance was so cute. Next, I read The Wedding People, and I'm about to go on a tangent with this one, guys. Buckle up. This one, first of all, as a story, on the story level, this was so fun to read, and especially like just crazy because the character, like, it was so funny because the way that she set it up and the way that you're like reading it, I was just like, okay, what is happening? Like, why is she at a hotel? Blah, blah, blah. Basically, the main character, she's checking into her hotel and she notices that everybody else at the hotel is there for a wedding. And she had no idea that this wedding was taking place, but apparently nobody other than the wedding people are supposed to be at this hotel. Like, they literally specifically wanted to rent out was it rent? No. They wanted to reserve the whole hotel. But somehow the main character ended up getting a booking. And it's so funny because like within the first like chapter, I think it's within the first chapter, the bride's like, oh, you're not part of the wedding? Like, you're not on the groom's side of the family? And she's like, no. And then she's like, well, what are you doing here? And she's like, I'm here to kill myself. And I was like, what? Like, what is happening? So basically, the main character, her husband cheated on her, and after like struggling with like miscarriage and stuff, so there are trigger warnings for this one too. I think that like content warnings that you want to just be aware of. After that, he cheats on her and he actually has a baby with another woman. I think he has another baby with another woman. Either he has another baby with another woman or she was already pregnant with her husband who died and then he's raising her baby. Oh yeah, that's what it is he gets with this woman who is pregnant and then he starts taking care of her baby. Now she's single and she's like, I have nothing to live for. Life is the worst. It sucks. I'm miserable. And she goes to like this fancy hotel that's very expensive. It's like $800 a night to kill herself. And I was like, what? Like, this is so crazy because I didn't read any search summaries, but so many people have been talking about this and recommending it. The whole story, I actually like kind of blossoms from there. Obviously, we all know she's not going to kill herself because if she was, there would be no book, right? This story, like, just aside from being such a fun story, this book made me think about just marriage, obviously, but also like the ceremony of marriage and the emphasis that we have on relationships and weddings. And I have been talking to my friends a lot about marriage recently. I mean, we always have. Here's the thing. I grew up in a very like Muslim culture centered like family, and so most of my friends are similar to that, and we've talked about like marriage and stuff so much. And something that especially recently we've been talking about is just this rush when you're so young, early 20s, even late teens, like 19, but like 19, early 20s, in the Muslim community specifically, to get married so young. And whenever I read books about relationships, but specifically books like about marriage and weddings, like this book, it always makes me think about like the fact that you can get so consumed by your partner, because like this lady literally loses her relationship and is basically like, I'm done, you know? And obviously it's way more nuanced than that. But it was making me think of like conversations that I've been having with my friends of why we place so much emphasis on relationships and marriage and being with a man and this and that, when like life is so much more than that, and a relationship is supposed to be a bonus to that. But in our community, it's always like, oh, rush. We need to get married right now. Otherwise, you're going to be like expired, basically. Like, it's done for you. And I don't know. I just feel like it's good to take your time. And in this book, like the bride especially, I don't want to give anything away, so I'm going to just be very vague, but the bride is very young compared to the groom, and she's just trying to like be perfect, and she wants to like have the perfect wedding and have the perfect relationship, and she wants everything to be perfect and everything to go right and blah blah blah. And the main character, who's like a lot older, and she's like past that marriage point, and she's like years and years into her marriage, is looking at this younger girl and being like, wow, you are so like not, and she's not in a judgmental way, but she's like, calm down, girl. It's not everything. This isn't everything. It's gonna be fine. Even if something goes wrong for your wedding, that it's going to be fine. I just really love this book. I thought it was so well done, and I actually listened to this as an audiobook, and the narrator did such a good job. I feel like this is something I'd want to reread just because it was so enjoyable. But I also I always wait to reread books up until a point where I've forgotten most of it. Highly recommend this one as well. Let me take a sip of tea because my throat's getting dry. Then the next book that I picked up is A Psalm for the Wild Built. A lot of people have been talking about this, by Becky Chambers. I think I forgot to say the authors for the previous ones, but their name will be there. This is basically, okay, first of all, this is how little I try to know going into the books that I read, where for the first hour of the audiobook, I was like, wait, the robot is the monk that's going to the thing, but then when the human meets the robot, I was like, oh, this person was a human. The tea monk was a human this whole time. I was really lost because I was like, wait, why is a robot talking about being attracted to this guy that's a hot dad? Which fair. I literally was like, suspension of disbelief. I get it. and then I was like, okay, girl, I think you were suspending your disbelief a little too much, because then it turned out that it was just a person. I really loved this one. I think that I read it at a really good time, especially in the last month or so, because it has so much commentary on the need for purpose and fulfillment, and how much emphasis human beings put on we need to make meaning of our lives. Our lives have to be for a reason. We have to have purpose. And I agree with all that, but it was also adding this counterpoint, which is that you also need rest, and you don't always have to be productive. You don't always have to be trying to accomplish something. It's okay if you're just being a person. And I just feel that right now because now that I'm not teaching anymore, I'm just like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And I keep telling myself, okay, do this, do that, do this. And I'm overwhelming myself. And so after I read this, I was like, okay, girl, let's take a deep breath. I just feel yeah, it was really well done. And the story was really, I think it was short and sweet, and it was exactly what I needed right now. So I'm really glad that I read it, and I do recommend it, especially if you're looking for a shorter book that's gonna pack a punch. This one was really good. I had to readjust my phone camera because it keeps falling. But the last book that I read was The Truth According to Ember, and this is a fun little romance book. It features Indigenous characters, which I really loved because there was a lot of references to their culture. They're living in Oklahoma City, and I just really appreciated a story, so such a fun, joyful story about Indigenous characters, because I feel non-white characters are always expected to, and this is another conversation I've been having with my friends, but I feel our stories are always expected to be full of grief and about our sadness and about our misery. And while all of that exists, there's a lot of joy in just our experiences. I actually picked this up because someone was talking about how books by Emily Henry are great and whatever, which I completely agree, but also we need to be looking at non-white romance authors as well, and romance books. So I picked this one up on I don't remember what the YouTube account was, but I will link it in the description just in case. So I picked this one up on her recommendation, and I have thoughts about this, but I don't want them to take away from the story, because actually the story was really funny and I enjoyed reading it. But I will say, and I don't think this is a criticism of the book necessarily. Well, two things. Romance is always usually a little more simplistic in its writing. So reading this alongside Human Acts was kind of jarring, because I was like, this is such a crazy difference between the two. But at the same time, it was a really good palate cleanser, and it was fun. And I love having feelings about the characters in the book, and that's what I did. I did not like the main character because she's a pathological liar, in my opinion. And also, she acts like a 16-year-old. She acts like a little girl, so immature. She would lie about the dumbest things, and I'd be like, girl, come on. but it feeds into the overall story, so it's fine. And yeah, I don't have like strong feelings about it. It's not like I don't hate it or anything like that. I just thought it was kind of crazy. You know what I mean? And I actually started reading this early on in May, so I was genuinely like, this was one of those I have certain books, I can dub them my bedtime books, but basically they're the books that I read like a few minutes of before bed. So there are the books that I read throughout my days and whatever, but there are specific books that I'll just like read a little bit of every night before bed, and this was mine for May, and I did really enjoy it. It was funny too. So those are all the books that I read in May. I did have a little bit of a reading slump toward the end of the month, and I think it's because I've been forcing myself to read specific books that are pushing me into reading slump, which you will see soon enough. But I'm hoping to kind of pick up fun books in June. So I'd love recommendations. Can you just like drop the titles of like a couple of the books that you read in May that you really loved, or anything that you read this year that you really loved, because I need recommendations. Like I feel like I'm losing, like I have my TBR list, but I always have this inclination also to like just find out about a book and just pick it up on a whim right then and there. I don't know, it's so weird. So just let me know what you've been reading lately so I can find some more books to pick up. Yeah, thank you for watching and thank you for listening to me yap. I know I went on a lot of tangents, so thank you for giving me your time. Thank you so much, and I will hopefully see you guys in another video very soon. Goodbye.